Hey guys, welcome to ChawDev. Hey, yeah. So let's give a hand for our sponsors today, providing this delicious chicken biscuits. Yeah, and Ethan Rogers is here from Skuid, and he's going to be talking about some CI/CD stuff. But before that, I'm going to have Elaine come up, and she's got an announcement.
Hello. Oh, it's on now. So my name is Elaine Queetham, and I hail from a boot camp focusing on front-end web development called Savvy Coders. And this afternoon, around 2:30, there's going to be a media advisory or a press release that says Chattanooga wins $50,000 grant for tech workforce development in partnership with TechTown Foundation and the Department of Youth and Family Development. So who knows TechTown? TechTown Foundation, a couple of people. They're doing some amazing things with kids. They've been doing a kids camp for the past 2 years. It's a whole long endeavor. I think it takes up 7 weeks of the summertime, so parents are really thrilled about that. But enough about, yeah, keep your kids busy for 7 weeks of the summer, right? So they're doing phenomenal work, and this is a really cool thing that they're going to be doing, hopefully starting in February. But I need your help because we need to recruit some folks that can instruct the really great curriculum that we've built teaching HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's been around for about 1.5 years now. We've taught a lot of students in Nashville and also in the St. Louis market. So I'm appealing to anyone that would like to help to let me know. I'm on the Slack channel. I'm part of your group. If you want to be in front of some folks on a regular basis, I think the curriculum's going to be delivered over about 2 months. Of course, more instructors, the better, because then you can kind of divvy up the workload. The curriculum is rock solid and already set, and I'm just really looking for folks that want to help. So, okay, I got one guy. Or do you have a question? I should ask, are there questions? I think it's Queetham. Yeah. Any other questions I can answer? Yes, sir. Queathem. Oh, I do? Oh, yes. How cool is that for all of you that don't use Slack? Other questions? Anybody excited about this? Cool. Okay. Well, please help because we need it to be successful.
Thanks. Does anybody else have any announcements, meetups, anything like that going on? Cool. Well, here's Ethan.
Right. What's up, guys? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ethan Rogers. I'm a build and release engineer at Skuid. You can find me at Twitter there and at Gitlab there, although there's not much on either of them. So, yeah, I'm here to talk to you today about Jenkins and building reproducible pipelines for builds and deployments with code, primarily focusing on the pipelines plugin that came packaged in Jenkins 2.0. Before I start, all code snippets that you'll see are at this repo here. I'll post the slides on the meetup when I'm done. And it's a fully built Jenkins cluster with Docker, so you can spin up your local Jenkins instance and a couple build agents and get going. So I'm going to talk about a couple things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jenkins for those of you who don't know. I'm going to talk about build agents using the Swarm plugin, job configuration as code using the Job DSL plugin, and pipelines as code. And if the demo gods are with me, we're going to do some demo. So first off, what is Jenkins? Jenkins is arguably one of the most popular CI/CD servers, but I like to think of it more as a job runner than anything. So you can code anything you want, any kind of automated task, and you can trigger it, on repo pushes, on a cron, you can trigger it to run daily. Just anything you want to do, if you can script it, you can run it. Super extensible and has a really rich plugin ecosystem. So if there's something that Jenkins doesn't do out of the box, there's probably a plugin for it. And if there's not, and you know a little bit of Java and some Groovy, you can just build it yourself. One of the things that they mentioned on their website is that you can distribute builds across everything. So Jenkins can run builds, the master node can run builds, but it's better if you can connect build agents and do that on beefier systems. As I said, it's more extensible than most CI/CD solutions out there. Gitlab CI, for instance, you can really only run your build for your project. Bamboo is terrible. And Concourse is a new one that's coming up. I just kind of threw that on there because I needed a third one. Like I said, if you can script it, you can run it. And there's a bunch of custom plugins. You can use it with pretty much any SCM on the market right now. So first, I'm just going to talk really quickly about adding dynamic build agents. They're pretty simple. So the Swarm plugin is a plugin you can install on your Jenkins master that will expose an endpoint for build agents to connect. It also, you can download a jar file that is just an executable to do that. So you can put that on any system that has Java, a Mac, any Linux box, any Windows box. And you can connect as many as you want, and you can assign them different labels. So if you have a box that has Docker on it, for instance, you can say any job that needs Docker to run can run on this job fine. And you can connect authenticated and non-authenticated masters. It really just depends on what arguments you pass to the client. So this is a simple little Docker file, and if you'll notice in the bottom right, I tried to put the file that these snippets come from. So if you go look at the repo afterwards, they'll be somewhat easy to find. So the base image that I like to use, if you're using Docker, you don't have to, but the base image I like to use is the Jenkins Swarm slave. It comes bundled with that client already installed, so you can just install everything you want on top of that. So what this one's doing is just installing NodeJS to run that. And here's a snippet from the Docker Compose file. You can see that I'm building with that file, giving it some environment variables, and then telling it what arguments to pass. So you can see that I've got a username and password because I need that to connect. And the labels for Node. Here's one. I'm going to do some demo of some like Docker and Docker stuff. So I needed a D&D slave, but it's very similar. So we'll see more of that stuff when we get into the demo. But one of the things that I'm really excited about right now, and it's something I started playing with recently, is reproducible job configuration as code. So with the Job DSL plugin, one of the really cool things you can do is you can script out all of your job configuration. Traditionally, Jenkins is a UI, right? You end up with a bunch of snowflake jobs because you have to go click, and there's not really a good way to back it up unless you can get in there and get the XML, and then if your Jenkins master goes down, just pray that you have that XML backed up. So yeah, and another really cool thing is you can check in your job configuration right with the rest of your code. So if someone on your team needs to make a change to the project and they don't have access to maybe a master repo of jobs, they can just change that job with the rest of their code and everything works great. So this might look a little scary. Jenkins has some Groovy DSL for defining build pipelines and jobs, and it can be a little confusing. But basically all this is saying is I have a pipeline job called Jenkins JDev, and I want to use the Jenkins file found in the app directory, and the repo is defined at the top, and the branch is master. So basically what it's doing is it's saying my build definition is in app Jenkins file, my project name is Jenkins JDev, and that's the repo that I want to check out when this job runs. So some of the pros. You get the flexibility of code rather than being constrained to a UI. So if you need to dynamically generate a whole bunch of jobs based on a single set of variables, you can do that because it's just Groovy, right? If you can script it, you can do it. Obviously, automation is a big thing. If you put your jobs all in a repository and your Jenkins master goes down, you just run your seed job again, and all of your jobs are built back up. You can make bulk changes to job configuration. So like I said, if you need to script out a bunch of those things, change one thing, regenerate your jobs. I say intuitive-ish DSL because obviously that is a little confusing. But there's a really cool tool online that's just a viewer, and you can kind of like drill down to all of the different things that you can do, and you kind of figure it out. So some of the cons, and this first one is really because you define it with Groovy, which is Java, and if you have to connect to some authenticated repository with like basic auth, it's kind of a pain in the butt to set those headers. Another bad thing is there's no really easy way to test before running it. So what I do is I have my local instance set up. If I have some kind of change I want to make before I push it out into our production system, I like to run it locally, see what the outputs, or run it on my local Jenkins, see what the output's going to be, and make sure that that's what I want. And like I said, it's a little confusing. It can be difficult to read. You just kind of know what you're looking at. So there are some resources. That first one is that DSL viewer, and there's the GitHub repo and some real-world examples of some things you can do. So now the meat, build pipelines. Define your builds as code. That's important because you want your developers to be able to make those changes. If they introduce some new feature that has some new dependency, you don't want to be the guy they call and say, hey, can you install this? If your developers can do it, it eases that burden. With some of the steps I'm going to show you, you can see each stage broken down. So if you can see the entire console output for an entire build run, but that might be a little confusing, scrolling for days to figure out, what happened. And pipeline stages are really good because they kind of contain all of the logs, so you can kind of see them broken out. It's easy to implement complex builds with Groovy. So if you have, maybe you have some HTTP endpoint that you need to talk to figure out some more information about a commit. You can do that because it's just code, right? You don't need some special tool that is proprietary that's going to go out and make that call for you. And it hides a lot of complexity behind pluggable steps. So Slack send will send a Slack message to whatever channel you tell it to. Archive will archive any artifacts, so you don't have to manually upload them anywhere. They'll just put them right inside Jenkins. So I've got a couple screenshots of the UI that you're going to see again, but you can see each of those little steps: install dependencies, test, and reporting. Those are those stages I was talking about. And you can click on the little green boxes and see the logs from each of those steps. One of the cool things that it comes packaged with is a generator for that DSL for defining your pipelines. So you can say, I have this Git repository, I want to check out master. You can generate it, and it will generate it for you. Drop that straight in your build file, and you're automatically checking out code. It also comes with built-in documentation, so there's no extra website you have to go to. You just go look at the documentation if you have any questions. So this is a build pipeline. This is defined. It's very similar to the Job DSL, a little less confusing, but you can see that I've commented out everything. So this would be a job that would run on a build agent that had NodeJS installed. No, that's not what the node at the top means. You'll see at the next slide. Basically, when you define node in a build, in a Jenkins file, it says this chunk of code, whatever in this block, has to run on another agent. So Jenkins has what they call a flyweight executor, and that's just a really lightweight executor. Doesn't get given a lot of CPU, doesn't get given a lot of memory, and so if you say, I want to run this on a node, it puts that out to one of your build agents that's connected that conforms to the labels that you define. So you'll see here that I'm just checking out the repo for this demo. I'm going to go into the directory app And that's where I'm going to run all of my stuff. So that all dir is saying cd into app. And then I'm defining these stages here. So this stage is install dependencies, and npm installs all the dependencies. And then test is just sh npm test. So I have a slide at the end with gotchas, but I'm just going to mention it here. If you don't do sh something, any code that you run runs on the master. The only thing that gets piped out to a build agent is if you say sh do this. That's gotten me a couple times. This one's very similar to the other one, but what it is it's an example like if you were using Docker. So the D&D build agents that I have set up don't have anything other than Docker installed on them. You can see where this could be really powerful. Maybe you have some job that needs Python and some job that needs Node in the same project. You can do all of those inside the Docker image or Docker container. So what inside is saying is anything that's defined inside that block, I'm going to run those commands inside the container. So it spits it off into the container, and everything happens in that environment. And then you can see stage test is just the same thing. Oh, and at the top, you'll see the node Docker. That's the label. So I think I just covered that stuff, so I'll skip over that. Oh, here's another good one that you didn't see. JUnit is one of those Groovy DSLs that just says, I have these JUnit test results. Let's archive those and then populate the results in Jenkins UI so you can actually drill down through your test suites and see what happened. Publish HTML is also really cool. So if you have any kind of code coverage or any kind of reporting that generates some HTML file, you can actually take that artifact, tell Jenkins, hey, this is an artifact I want, and I want to display this to my users under the report name code coverage. And we'll see that in the demo because I think that's really cool. Some gotchas that have gotten me. Some of these things are actually what inspired me to give this talk because I had a heck of a time finding out this information. And so it could be really confusing, and so I just wanted to mention them here. All of your Groovy runs in a sandboxed environment. So what that means is there are some things that can't be run without approval. Some things that may be considered dangerous to the plugin designers, I guess, need to be approved. Builds are not automatically cleaned up. That's something we run into a lot at Skuid, is with Node projects specifically, if you npm install, you're npm installing a lot of files. There are a lot of small files, and so they could take up a lot of inodes. So we run into that issue regularly where we run out of inodes even though our disk space is fine. So you need to be really careful about cleaning up your stuff. Another thing is not all plugins support pipeline syntax. So there have been times where I'd say, I want to do this, there's a plugin to do it, but there's no way for me to call it. So you usually end up having to do that by hand. I'll go back up to the top. So as well as running inside a sandbox, Jenkins builds can be, how do I say this? If something happens and the build agent that the job is running on goes down, Jenkins will serialize every variable in memory and store that. So when the job comes back online, or the agent comes back online, it can pick up where it left off, which is really cool if you have a really simple pipeline. If you have to do something with JSON, it gets a little hairy. That's why I have JSON Slurper versus JSON Slurper Classic. Because JSON Slurper does not serialize. Your Jenkins will tell you you have a not serializable exception, and it will take a day of banging your head against the wall to figure out what's going on. So if you need to use JSON in a pipeline, please use JSON Slurper Classic, because that serializes. Some resources that have helped me in the past, the pipeline plugin tutorial, and obviously the repo that's in. So let's do some demos. And I didn't. Everybody see that okay? Do I need to make it a little bit bigger? How's that? I only did that for this talk, so everyone could see it. Okay, so let's see. Compose. So you can see that, actually you can't because that's really hard to read. But I'll just go ahead and tell you. I've already pre-configured this Jenkins instance with a username, and so I can get the agent set up. And I've set up the seed job for generating all the jobs. I have 2 nodes right now that are not connected. One of the cool things about Swarm is that you can start them up and take them down at any time, and they'll connect automatically as long as you've configured it properly. Another really cool thing about that is if your master goes down, they'll still sit there and try to connect until your master comes back online. So you don't have to, if your master goes down, you don't have to go back in and say, oh, I got to start all these build agents up again. They'll just reconnect. So what we'll go ahead and do, and that's a bad thing about Jenkins, is it's terrible UI. But you can see here that I've got no executors connected. We're going to go ahead and connect our build agents, and we should see them start to register immediately. There we go. They are online. So, as you know, I had a Node build agent and a Docker build agent. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to generate those 2 pipeline definitions that I showed you, the one for Docker and the one for Node, are in our app. It's just a really simple Node app that defines an add function and some tests around that. So we're going to go ahead and automatically generate those jobs based on that snippet that I showed you at the beginning with the DSL plugin. As you can see, I've run this a couple times to make sure it works, but we'll click Build Now. We can actually go in and see what it's doing. So you can see all of the console output. It's checking out the repo, processing the jobs, and it's generating the jobs. So that then generated Jenkins CHAdev Docker pipeline and Jenkins CHAdev. So let's go ahead and run one of these guys. This is the Node one. It's never been run, and we will build it. So I'm triggering these manually, but I want it to be known that you can also trigger them on commits. Like I said earlier, you can trigger them to run on a cron. However you want to do it, Jenkins will support it. So you'll see it's checking out the repo at the branch that I have it configured for. It's going to run it. This one is not running it's running inside a Docker container, but it's not running all the stages inside a container. It's just running straight up raw node commands. And it's done npm installing. You can see that we ran our tests, and you can see that we have recorded our test results, and we've archived our code coverage report. So let's look at the code coverage report. Great, we don't have any failures. You can see the test cases that ran, and that's all well and good. But one of my favorite things is the HTML report, right? So you don't have to push this out anywhere that your developers have access to. They can just look at it right in Jenkins, and it will tell you, here's your code coverage, there's your linting report. This is the reporting library I'm using. It doesn't have anything to do with Jenkins. Jenkins can have any kind of HTML there if you want to. So I will go ahead and run the Docker one, and we should see the same exact output, but just the fact that the job and everything is running inside a NodeJS Docker container and not straight on the build agent itself. I'm gonna start doing everything. You'll see it. It should already have the image. I shouldn't have to pull the image, but come on. This one gave me problems when I first got here, so let's hope it works. Okay, while we're waiting, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, so I can go ahead, I can just repeat it, yeah. The question was, can you use something like a static analysis tool like Sonar to produce reports? Yeah, so like if you can run it on like in a command line, you can do it. If Sonar will output HTML, you can just publish your HTML. That's kind of one of the great benefits of pipelines is as long as the dependency's there, you can just run it like it's a normal command. Well, I don't think that that one's going to work, but I'll just tell you what it's going to do. It's going to do the exact same thing that the other one did. But yeah, that went really quick. So it should fail eventually, right? Yeah, it should fail eventually, and it probably will. So that's really all I have. We're hiring, if anyone's interested. Are there any other questions?
Saying the Groovy runs in a sandbox, so I guess there's, can you comment on the security, I guess, issues with this master machine?
Can you say that last part again?
I guess, can you say more about the security issues running this master machine with agents installed on all your stuff?
Interestingly enough, like 2 days ago, Jenkins reported a vulnerability for remote code execution from a so if you had access to a build agent, there's a port, obviously, that it has to connect on. There was a remote code execution vulnerability between the two. They've since patched that. So really, if you're on the build agent, you have access to the machine because you have the connection. It's just any build jobs that you run are run inside that. So it can't break out unless you actually approve like this suspect script. So it can't break out. So you're fine in the context of a build or any kind of job that's running. But you know, if you have some vulnerability on your machine, you have a vulnerability on your machine. There's not really anything you can do about it. Yeah. I can actually go in and show you what that looks like under this Manage Jenkins setting. And I actually have one that's waiting approval. So this is what it would look like if somebody put something in their job that, you know, was that Jenkins said, hey, you know, this is a little risky. Maybe you should check this out. It'll tell you. So what you can do is you can say like any user who started a job that has permissions to do this, that's fine. If you click this approve, assuming permission check. If you just click approve, anyone that puts that specific line of code in or tries to use that specific API will be able to do it. So yeah, you can configure your users in any way. You can configure some users to only be able to see builds, be able to see and run builds. Or you can configure people to be able to actually approve these things themselves. Typically, when I run into that situation, I just go in here and click approve. Usually, if you have to approve one thing, you have to approve like 10 other things. It doesn't just tell you all, it just stops before. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Right, yeah, so as soon as you hit that method call, it's gonna be like, nope, you gotta approve this. And that's why I said, if you have to approve one thing, it's like 10 things, because probably on down the chain, there are other things that have to be approved. What else?
Yeah, for the like reusability of the code piece, if you're sharing it between teams, have you gone down that road yet? Or are you guys just doing it for one project?
Yeah,
what's
so
it look like?
there are, there's a plugin called the Global Workflow plugin that will let you define like classes that you can use, like reusable bits of code. Classes, just methods that you maybe want to call across that, and your jobs can actually pull those libraries in and use them. So what it is, it's just a Git repo on the Jenkins master, and you can define those things, and any job that runs within your ecosystem can do that. And if maybe you have two teams that are running two different Jenkins instances, they could both use the same repo as long as you have it in like GitHub or something. And there are also, I think Docker has one in Fabric 8. They have theirs online. So if you have like some use case that you can't really figure out, you can most of the time Google it and find somebody who's done it.
Thanks.
Yep. Right, yeah, so, yeah, that's a good point too. If you have some method, maybe you want to contain a whole bunch of logic to keep your build script clean, you can actually dynamically load Groovy scripts that are found in your project and use code from those as well. Do you have a question?
I think you may have started to answer my question there. Well, it was about branching and forking. So let's say a test failed or something like that. Could you fork? Could you branch or could you stop execution of that pipeline? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So anytime that a command returns a status code of 1 or a non-zero status code, the build will stop. What it'll do is it'll throw an exception, and you can actually wrap that in a try-catch and say, and just catch that exception, do some stuff, and then if you really care that test failed, but you had to clean something up, you can just did I go to sleep? Yeah, you can just clean your stuff up and then rethrow that exception. So yeah, you can do whatever you want really.
I got one more. Maybe I missed a bit, but I wasn't super clear on the relationship or difference between a job and a pipeline.
Okay, that's a good point. So a pipeline would, how would I say this? So Jenkins has the ability to trigger downstream jobs. So if you have like this pipeline, you have separated jobs, you can do that. I think what Jenkins whoever wrote the pipeline plugin, I think they assume or they call this a pipeline. So it's like you have these different stages. But you could even go so far as to like be triggering other jobs. There's actually a build pipeline plugin that will show you a view of like if it starts at this job and then all these jobs trigger, it'll show you the linkage between the two. So really just like, yeah, a pipeline is do this thing, keep it going down.
I guess maybe just like a job is more like say that you want to have a bunch of different branches off of your master or dev branch, and then they basically are like clones of the same logic that's in your dev branch with maybe some slightly different stages. Like all the jobs would be, maybe there's different jobs for each branch that a developer is working on, which all run they do the same pipeline steps, but the job is more like the instance of the pipeline or an execution of the pipeline.
Any more questions?
Nope. If not, feel free to talk to me afterwards or contact me somewhere.
Give Ethan a hand.